And thank you so much for attending today's event, sponsored by the New England chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, New England chapter. So excited to be here. My name is Kelsey Nicole Nelson, and I am a sports journalist based out of our nation's capital of Washington, D.C., and I'm also a proud member of the SPJ Sports Committee. Thank you so much for having me here. Truly an honor. So today, you guys see a special guest on the screen. We're here tonight with the legendary sports columnist who has covered some of the most prolific events in sports history, as well as athletes. He's worked as a sports reporter and a columnist for the New Jersey Star-Ledger, forget this, over 70 years, over 70 years. So we're gonna have lots of knowledge here with us today. Izenberg is one of only 2 daily newspaper columnists who have covered the first 53 Super Bowls, the first 53, as well as 54 consecutive Kentucky Derby races, and the last 5 Triple Crown winning horses. So exciting. And no one has covered more of Muhammad Ali's fights than he, dating back to the 1960 Olympics. He's also a recipient of the Red Smith Award for sports writing, and he has been named the New Jersey Sports Writer of the Year 5 times. So he definitely knows what he's been doing. He's an inductee in 17 Hall of Fames, including the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Hall of Fames, the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. He's here with us tonight to talk about his recently released memoir, which I hope all of you all have a chance to check out, Baseball, Nazis, and Nedick's Hot Dogs, Growing Up Jewish in the 1930s in Newark. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us. How are you tonight?
Well, I'm a lot better now. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good.
I'm excited. I know everyone's excited. We're honored to have your time, so I won't waste into it. So let's get to it. I know we and you had a chance to talk before we started this live Zoom, and we talked about this being your 15th book, this memoir. So I want to just get into it. What made you decide to write this memoir about growing up in Newark, New Jersey?
Well, one thing is I had written just about everything else, and I am starting on my 18th book now, but that's another story. I wrote it because I lived it. I wrote it because of a place called Charlottesville, in which the then President of the United States, you know, funny thing about it, you can't legislate love. You can't legislate like, but you can legislate keeping your damn mouth shut. I grew up in the worst period of anti-Semitism in this country. And nobody fell in love with anybody, but it stopped in the sense that people might have thought it, but they didn't express it. And that was for a number of years, life was better in terms of relations between Jews and everybody else. And then this guy came along and in Charlottesville gave them permission, a license to open their mouths again. And we're paying a fearful price for it right now. But we're going to come out of it and we're going to win, because if we won in the 30s, you have no idea what it was like in the 30s. We had Gerald L.K. Smith was a lay minister in Arkansas, and he did a passion play at a restricted Christian resort about the perfidious Jews. We had William Dudley Pelley, who ran the Silver Shirts. The bad people ran out of shirts. Mussolini had the black shirts, brown shirts. Hitler had the black shirts, or vice versa. We had those people. Charles A. Lindbergh, who flew the Atlantic solo the first time, became the head of a group. Sounds familiar. It wasn't invented by the current marionette. It was called America First. And he was a Nazi. We had all that and more to contend with. Now, I lived in Newark, New Jersey. And in those days, you know, times change, people move. In those days, Newark had 410,000 people. And it was the essence of a real hardworking, blue-collar factory town. My old man worked in the factory, it killed him in the end. And that kind of stuff. And the Jewish population, it wasn't a majority or anything, but it was very significant in Newark. Across the line in Irvington was the state headquarters of the German-American Bund. And the traffic between the two towns got to be very physical. That was before I knew what was happening. When I was 2, a group of Jewish prize fighters from Newark and a group of Bundists from Irvington fought in the streets with baseball bats, and the mayors. This is 43. This is a good 11 years before the war, and I was exposed to it in many ways. I remember my father. My father was he was a professional baseball player. Never made the major leagues. It was his dream, but I don't know how good he was. To me, he was the best who ever played. But anyway, he had a very cosmopolitan view because I remember he came here in 1882. I'm 92. And there were times when he was the only Jew in his league, because at that point, all the immigrant Jews were saying, you're going to stay in school, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be this, you're getting educated, because it was against the law to go to school where they came from. My old man came from Lithuania when he was 8. But so he got to very personal relationship with anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitic pictures were throwing at his head. Now, when you want to hit a batter, you don't throw at his head, you throw behind his head, because the reflex action is to pull back. That's what they were aiming for. And he had quite an experience, but that affected our relationship. He one day, my 8th year was a very big year for me. I'm 8 years old, I'm walking down the street and I see in blue chalk, I can see it right now, the sidewalk had come up on one side, as it will when it's not tended right, and written, it was crooked, and written across it in blue chalk was, all Jews are kites. Well, I knew I couldn't fly. I mean, I didn't know much at that age, but I couldn't be a kite. What the hell did it mean? I went to my father and he said, it means, first of all, the guy who wrote it is an illiterate moron, because the word is kike. And he ran off a couple of names, Sheeny, Kike, Jubash. He said, when anybody tells you that, now, if anybody says somebody called you that, that doesn't count. But if you hear somebody face to face say something like that, here's what you're going to do. You're going to do everything I taught you. You're going to smile at him so he relaxes. You're going to hit him with the best right hand you ever threw in the jaw. And if you don't finish with a left hook, do not come home. He was an amazing man. And this book really is, somebody who reviewed it got it right on the nose. A lot of people miss it. Maybe I should have done a better job, but I think I did okay. The thing with my father was, he said, the subliminal plot of this whole book, it's about me growing up for the first 21 years of my life. But this is really a love affair between a father and his son. And that's what it was. That's exactly what it was. And my father never, he hit me twice in my whole life until I was 21, and I left the house, went to Korea. And, but he had ideas for me. 10 years old, well, first when I was 7, he took me to my first ball game. Now, he always wanted to play for the New York Giants. They're in California now. But he really wasn't that good. But he lived and died with that radio, listening to the Giant games every single night. And he had a little Philco radio in every time the Giants did something bad. And they had not won a league championship from 1937 until 1951. He'd bang the top of the Philco. Mellot hit into a double play, bang the top of the Philco. Now, in the summers, my mother sat at one end of the porch. Under strict, there were rules at our porch every summer, because that's what baseball season was. He would sit at the other end, listen to the radio, bang, hit it, rang. A rabbi by the name of Joachim Prince, a very famous rabbi. He was the warm-up speaker. You may know this, for Martin Luther King on the Mall. I don't know if you knew that. He bar mitzvahed me. I got a quarter a week to take his kids to school. I was a man, I was 12. So I had these little kids in my charge. And it was great, shut up, don't talk, of course, in the street here. And so I got a quarter. It was 2 kids. I wanted 50 cents, but they said, no, it's a quarter. That's it. You get 12.5 cents a kid. Well, so my mother would talk about the school, Avon Union Grammar School, because that's where his kids went. I took them there, and it's where I went, but they had to talk softly at that end of the porch. You didn't violate, you didn't do anything till the game was over. My father was listening to the game one night, and Rabbi Prince breaks the rules. Now, I got to tell you about this man. He got out of Nazi Germany the day before they came for him. So he was on the first Freedom Riders buses to Alabama. And I told you about Martin, and he and Martin Luther King marched together, locking arms many, many times. So he comes up the steps, he says to my father, Harry, you need a favor. My father looks at him like he's wiping something off the bottom of his shoe. And he says, not now. Mel Ott is coming to bat. So Mel Ott does something very bad. My father bangs him. He says, now what did you want? He said, I want you to teach me about baseball. My father said, I didn't think you cared. He said, I don't. But I want the relationship over baseball that you and Jerry have with my boys. Well, my mother heard that. She knew what was going to happen. She got up, she got off the porch. Asking my father to talk about baseball would be the same as giving my first wife a valid credit card after we parted ways. I mean, my father couldn't wait. He was just wait. So they talked for an hour. Now he says to my father, well, Harry, I don't know what I can do for you in return because you're never in shul, temple, Yiddish. And that was true because I only saw my father in shul twice my whole life, my bar mitzvah and his funeral. My father was what I would call a cultural Jew rather than a ritualistic Jew. But he had definite idea because he'd been getting the crap kicked out of him when he was a kid, and everything. So and he could fight. So he had definite ideas. You're going to Hebrew school after 3 days a week. I said, I'm not doing that. I got to be in school 5 days a week, which on me was a strain. I was such a terrible kid to teachers and everybody. And in the book, as you read the book, you see how bad I was every. And I had such bad luck. When I was in the 5th grade, I meet this girl in the playground. I always liked older women. So I'm about 11 and she's 13. She's a senior. She's going to graduate. And I said, you want to go to movies? I'll pay for it. She said, oh, yeah, sure. We picked the Roosevelt Theater, about 8 blocks from my house. She meets me. We go inside. Double feature, Lone Ranger cereal, 3 cartoons. Saturday's a pretty good day for me for movies. So we sit down, the lights go out. I got fresh, bang, I get slapped in the face. But she didn't get out. She moves 5 seats down because she's got a free ticket. She's going to stay there. This was the Depression. No kid had any money. And I said, well, win some, lose some. So the next thing that happened, I find out when I go back to school on Monday, she is my teacher's daughter. That was a very interesting year.
I'm sure.
When I was in the 3rd grade, I fell in love for the first time. I thought I was in love in the 2nd grade with a girl called Marie Galizzo, but it just didn't work out. Now I'm in the 3rd grade, and I had an early interest in young women. So I'm sitting directly in front of me is a girl named Anita Richter. I remember all this. Don't ask me how. I got to get her attention because, Romeo had to yell up to the balcony to get you. I got to think of something. She had long braids. We had desks that probably you have never seen where the top lifts up and the important stuff went inside, like a half-eaten bologna sandwich, unchewed gum. You put it down, and the upper right-hand corner was an inkwell. We had wooden pens, and as you progressed as a writer, you started with a green pen, and then you got a blue pen, and you got a red pen. I graduated from the 8th grade with the same blue pen I started with. I was terrible. But anyway, I see her braids, and I say, I'm going to make her look at me. I take one of the braids and dip it in the inkwell. All hell breaks loose. She screams. Miss Van Hess, my third grade teacher, waddles up the aisle, she's very fat, and slaps me in the face 3 times, because in those days, you were allowed to hit the kids, well, my father was an immigrant from Lithuania, and like all immigrants, he had aspirations for his kids. And the big thing there was education, because they weren't allowed to go to school, they were Jewish. So I come home, my eyes swollen. He says to me, "You had a fight." I said, "No, I didn't." "Don't lie to me. You had a fight." I said, "No, Miss Van Hess hit me." He said, "Miss Van Hess, really?" Bang, I got it on the other side. That was a breath. He said, "Look, you got 2 marks now. When a teacher talks, you listen to the teacher." Well, that's the way, because that's what he never had, and he wanted us to have an education. But anyway, all through grammar school, I was in trouble. In the third grade, Miss Van Hess now, we're not getting along, third grade teacher. I wished all kinds of plagues on her. I said, it may work in the Bible. I guess it doesn't, I don't have that power. She falls on the eye, then there is a God. And I think the God pushed her, because the next thing I know, she fell in the playground and broke her leg. And she was so fat, they had to take her to the hospital to set it and everything. So now we get, I don't know, when you were young, it was a little different than I was young, but we love to get a substitute, because they never knew what they had to do. We salivated over that prospect. Okay, so now, well, class, what were we doing in English? We don't know. What we doing? Well, what we doing in math? We don't know. We don't know. Well, she was smart. She said, "Well, we're going to do something good today. We're all going to write get well letters to Miss Van Hess." One mistake, she didn't read them. So Jerry decides he'll write that woman a letter, and he writes, and I thought there was a serial on television, on the radio, wasn't any television, on a radio called The Shadow. I don't know if you ever heard. You could go invisible and cloud men's minds. I'm the shadow. They'll never catch me. They wouldn't catch me. I signed it, "Your student, Jerry Izenberg," but they wouldn't know who did it. I wrote this poem for her. And I remember like yesterday, "Roses are red, violets are blue. I've had lousy teachers, but never like you." Well, that took the rest of the year. She came back with a brace on her leg, and it was horrible. Now we're moving up to the 4th grade. She didn't want to promote me, but she had to. Because if I had to take the 3rd grade over, God forbid, I might be in the same classroom with her again. So no. Okay, so now it's silly. The teachers sometimes get silly. You have to hold hands. There were 2 4th grade teachers. Which one are we going to get? The mean one or the good one? Walk down the hall. She's holding my hand and she's breaking. I got a little hand. I'm 8 years. I'm just turning 9. The teacher she took us to was named Miss LaJoy, a good one. And she said, "Miss LaJoy, this class, 3rd grade class I'm giving you, is the smartest, best behavior we've ever had, except for this one. But don't worry about him, because he'll be in a reformatory before the year's over." And she pushes me in the room. Miss LaJoy was one of those women who had a gift, men or women had a gift for teaching. So now she learns right away. First way to get me to learn, you got to isolate me. So now nobody's sitting in front of me. There's an aisle to my left and an aisle to the right, but nobody's sitting in that seat. Now I'll have to learn, because I can't, well, who can I bother? Anita Richter got the other 4th grade, I couldn't bother her. So now Miss Van Hess is teaching something, I don't know what, and walking and teaching. She stops and looks down. I have a book hidden under my desk and I'm reading it. And then she says, "Stay after school." And then she's walking. That didn't mean anything. I stay after school every day was nothing new. My mother and father thought my school day ended at 6 because I was always getting in trouble. So now she comes and I'll never forget this woman. She was one of the 2 great teachers I had, and she was in 4th grade. She sits on a desk facing me, and she said, "What's the name of that book?" And I told her it was called The Robe. It was a bestseller by a man named Lloyd Douglas. It was about Jesus' robe and how when they crucified him, it had healing qualities if you touched it. So she said to me, "Where'd you get the book?" I said, "My mother's bookcase." "Did you have permission?" "Well, I don't need permission." "What do you mean you don't need permission?" My mother has an empty bookcase. And she joined the Book of the Month Club so she could fill it up with smart books and make people think she's smart. And when it gets filled, she's going to leave the club. I know that. So she said, tell me the story. I tell her the story. He said, okay, I know what the problem is. You're getting done with your work too soon. And I'm saying, oh shit, here it comes. I'm going to get this ton of homework. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that. That wasn't in her plans at all. He said, here's what we're going to do. You finish your work ahead of the class generally. If you do that, you have my permission to pull out the book, put it on the desk where everybody can see it, and read it until we go to the next subject. And when you finish that book, you take it, put it back in your mother's empty bookcase, and get another book with her permission this time, bring it to me, and I will approve it. And if I approve it, you can do the same thing. I read 4 books that year. I had the vocabulary of a 28-year-old. I mean, because they were all adult books. I don't those little things about Jane and Spot the dog and Skip her friend and how they did things. Yeah, that not for Jerry. So anyway, she was the first really teacher that meant anything to me until I got to college. So that was the way I started out. There's a lot of anti-Semitism. I used to have to walk home past Blessed Sacrament School. And I always knew when it was Holy Thursday because the door would bang open about the time I got there. Nedick, there he is, and he killed our Lord. And I had to fight my way. Well, that was America then. But at least when we had fights then, nobody used a knife or a gun or picked up a rock or anything. We had a fight. And then usually we were friends the next day. In this case, not so much, but in most cases, we had a fight with her. So my father looks at me and I got a bloody lip and a black eye, and he says, this has got to stop. He said, you don't go anywhere Saturday. I said, well, you're punishing me for getting in a fight? You see that? I'm not asking you how you got it. I'm asking you how you lost it so badly. Stay here Saturday. Saturday, the doorbell rings and there's a guy there with a twisted nose, 2 cauliflower ears. He's a professional boxer and a very good one named George Cornfeld, middleweight. And he says, you must be Jerry. Now, I am convinced he's a truant officer. He knew my name. And I set a world record for grammar school kids cutting school and going to the local ballpark and watching the local team, the Newark Bears, constantly. Well, my father comes out. He says, oh, George, you're here. Gets a pair of boxing gloves out of the closet. I didn't even know he had them. Hands them to George. He says, you take them to the cellar. It was depression. We didn't have a basement with a little bar, but we had a cellar with a big furnace and a lot of dirt. And he said, you take him down there. He doesn't come up till he can defend himself. We get down there. He puts the gloves on me. He says, they feel okay? I said, yeah, they're pretty good. Bang. He steps on my foot, elbows me in my side, slaps me 3 times in the face. I said, whoa. He said, I'm not here to teach you how to box. I'm here to teach you how to fight. When I came out of that basement, I wanted to fight. I didn't care. I wanted to fight. I thought maybe my sister, but I get in too much trouble for that. She was 2 years older. So now Sunday, I'm strolling past the Catholic school, slower and slower, and they're out there. And they make a line. And I said, okay, who's first? And this kid, much bigger than me, says, I'm first, and there won't be a second. So I kick him in the shins, elbow him in the side, slap him in the face. He's on the ground crying. Now, I'm the world heavyweight champion. And I go, who's next? And I look, there's 12 more kids waiting. I said, feet, do your stuff. I can't do this 12 more times. I run home. I never told my father that I ran away, but I told him about the first fight. He said, all right, now you take care of yourself. He believed in learning by example. During the Depression, it was very common. These people really sacrificed to get a home. We lived in a 4-family house for quite a while. Then my father put together $6,000 and bought a house where every window was broken and the door and the wall, the stairs were collapsing. But they fixed it up, and so that's where we're living at that point. I'm 10 years old and he says, go out and sweep the sidewalk. Sweep the sidewalk? Well, sweep the sidewalk. I don't know. I didn't make it dirty. What do you want me to? He said, go sweep the sidewalk. Well, I didn't realize he did it every Saturday, but now I'm 10, let me, learn. Everybody on the block did it. People, they had so little, but they were proud of what they had. He planted roses on the garage door on the side of it. And I went back there about 10 years ago, and the roses are still blooming. So, it was a nice feeling. Okay, I go out, I'm sweeping this. Well, not much to sweep. There's a gum wrapper, there's a couple of cigarette butts. It was public street, people dropped stuff. And I'm looking and I know I'm doing it wrong. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but he's standing there with his arms folded, nodding and watching me. So something's coming and I don't know what it is. And he said, you done now? I said, well, yeah. He said, no, you're not done. That is not the city of Newark's garbage. That's the Izenberg garbage. You know where our garbage cans are. You get a dustpan. I don't care if you have to make 50 trips. Everything goes in a garbage can, and then you can play baseball. So I look at him and I say, why do I have to do this? That was really a breach of the way I normally spoke to him. And he looked at me and I think he considered death for a moment and then said, no, I'll let him live. He said, I'm going to answer that question. And as long as you live in the house that I pay the mortgage for, your mother cooks the meals for, you will, each time I'm going to give you the answer, and each time you say, why, till you leave it. And he did it till I was 21. Here's what he said. There used to be a thing, he never called them bars, he called them saloons. That was his generation. And they were like men's clubs, it's where nobody had any money. That's where you could meet, get a beer. He said, all of the saloons in the New York, New Jersey area put out a free lunch. It was a lost leader. They made it back on the beer that was drunk and everything. And then one day they said, they're still drinking beer. We don't have to do this. And one by one, they stopped giving the free lunch. I'm wondering, where the hell is this going? And he says, the last bar to give a free lunch was the White Rose Bar. And the White Rose Bar is closed. Ain't no free lunch left in America. Pick up the damn garbage. And every time I would say why about something, he'd say, ain't no free lunch anymore. White Rose Bar is closed. But he had his ways. One of the great rituals between us, he had because he'd been a ball player for so many years, he had an old catcher's glove and a fielder's glove in the basement, his cellar. He would come home in the summer. He left the house at 5 a.m. to get to work in the factory. It was a dye house. He kept inhaling that stuff. So now he comes to, we get 6 o'clock in the summer, it's light. He'd come home and he'd say, get the gloves. We go out in the alley and we play back and forth. He thought, my getting a baseball glove, first I had to learn how to take care of it because there's no money for replacement. Second, I had to respect it. And third, according to him, I had to earn it. And he'd throw the ball back and forth. And if I didn't drop 3 in a row, he'd say, you're getting there. Okay, now it's the winter. There's a blizzard. And in those days, the climate was different. And in New Jersey, we had blizzards so very often. I'm standing in the living room with the same coat that I'm wearing on the cover of the book, and knickers and long stockings, and shoes, but no boots. And I got a muffler. He comes and he wraps a muffler around me. My mother comes in. She says, in Yiddish, she says, what is this? Where is he going? What is this all about? My father said, we have important business. And she said, have you looked outside? Important business? And he said, well, you're crazy. Don't take him in this way. He said, we're going. And out we went. In those days, when you had heavy snow, you heard the buses before you saw them because there was no snow tires. There were chains. And they broke on the cement. So they would bang, bang, bang as the bus is coming down the street. So I can hear it, but I can't see. There's so much snow I can't see. go down to a sporting goods store in Newark, you walk in and there's a barrel of gloves. And he says, come with me. He starts taking the gloves out one at a time and smelling them. Oh. Then he finds one, he said, little tan glove, my first glove. And he said, this is the one. I'm gonna pay for it now. I look at the heel of the glove and they had a ball player's autograph on the bottom. You know, it was as close as they ever came to making extra money. And the guy's name was Jimmy Gleason. Well, I had seen Jimmy Gleason in my very first baseball game at 7. He was the left fielder of a minor league club that I loved called the Newark Bears. Now I'm going to be Jimmy Gleason. I'll be unstoppable, right? We're on a bus and my father kills me. He says, now we're not going to do anything with this glove. When we get home, you're going to go down to the cellar, get a bottle of Neat's foot oil. It's on the shelf. We're going to soak the glove in that. I'm going to give you a baseball. You're going to put it in the middle. I'll give you a belt. They'll tie it up and we'll leave it so it'll make a pocket there for when spring comes, you're going to play. And I'm looking at him, my first glove, and now I'm going to put it away for 6 months. And he looks at me and he says, how the hell with it? Come on. So we're out in the driveway. It's snowing. I mean, it's snowing almost up to your knees. And no coats. And my mother is banging on the window, hollering in Yiddish, "Meshuggas, crazy people. You're going to kill my firstborn son. Get him in the house." And my father says, I can't hear her. Can you? And I said, I can't hear her either. And then he says, well, now I'm in a conspiracy. And then he says to me, okay. He throws the ball straight up in the air as high as he can throw it. And he said, okay, Jimmy Gleason, the Bears are in the 9th inning and they're playing for the International League pennant. And if Jimmy Gleason doesn't catch this ball, they're going to lose the championship. I can't be the reason for that. I'm Jimmy Gleason. And I look up and all I can see is snow. I can't pick the ball. It's white. I can't pick it out of the snow. I'm going back and all of a sudden I stick my hands out in the glove. I close it. I look at my father and he smiles. And on that day, he gave me the greatest gift of my life. He taught me a love of baseball. He taught me that I could do things I didn't think I was able to do. And he taught me that he and I were very close. And one other thing happened, if you want to, I don't go do a monologue if you want to ask me something, but one other thing happened with baseball. I sneak into the ballpark. And I learned how to sneak into Rupert Stadium when I was 9. And if you stayed in the bleachers in the daytime, they were never sold out, you know, they didn't care. But if you came in the grandstand, the ushers who wore these red jackets throw you out of the ballpark. Well, one day I sneak into the grandstand and I find a scorecard, a huge scorecard from the day before on the floor. I pick it up, I lean over the railing, and here comes a guy. I'm not going to name him because it wasn't his fault, it was mine. I lean over and I said, gotta have your autographs, gotta have it. He said, no, kid, not today, not today. I didn't realize ball players were people. They were heroes to me, not people. I didn't realize they got constipated. I didn't realize they didn't have sex the night before. I didn't realize any number of things. This guy could have been struggling with anything. And I said, you could do it, you could do it. He took the scorecard, tore it in half and threw it on the ground. And God, now I'm about 11 years. And he keeps walking toward the bullpen. I could understand it if a Jersey City Giant or a Montreal Maple Leaf or someone like that, but one of my guys do this to me. Doesn't he know I root for him all the time? What's wrong with this man? A woman comes up to me, takes me by the hand and says, come with me. I said, oh, you're gonna put me out of the ballpark now on top of that. She walks down the third base line. There's about 20 women sitting. He says, sit with these women, I'll be right back. They were the players' wives. She goes down, leans into the dugout, comes out with a baseball, autographed by this championship team. Walks up the steps and says, this is yours. I saw what happened. No ball player should do that to a kid. And she looked at me and she said, do you know who George Sternweiss is? His nickname was Snuffy. Snuffy, oh, sure, I waved to him all the time when I come out. He was his second baseman. She said, I'm Mrs. Sternweiss, Jane Sternweiss. ladies, what's your name, Jerry? Ladies, this is Jerry. I know he's going to get in trouble this summer in the ballpark when school is out. Help him out if you see him, you know. Well, I was in love now, right? 30 years go by. I'm writing a column for the paper. I don't have anything to write. I walk into, we used to get teletypes. You've seen them in the movies, the old news, the bang, bang, bang. And I'm looking and reading the news, trying to find something to write about that, right? The bridge over the Hudson River between New York and New Jersey didn't go back down. Worst train disaster in the history of the East. Right into the thing. There's about 34 dead. And I'm reading the names. George Sternweiss is one of them. So I go and I write a piece about my baseball sweetheart and her husband, right? About a week later, I get a neatly typed envelope, open it up. I can't read a word of it. It's all over the lot. And a little note, post-it note from her nurse. I am Mrs. Sternweiss's nurse. And she wanted to try to, she has MS, and she wanted to write this herself. And she wanted you to know she remembers you. Well, that's a beautiful story, except that's not the end of it. When I did a book called Through My Eyes, which is my autobiography about the things I'd seen and done, and I was only a kid then, I wrote that one in like 78. So I wanted to check something. I used that story and I wanted to check, I forget whether she was born in Newark, something I remembered about her, I didn't know. She had a daughter who was a barmaid in Red Bank, New Jersey, which was down the Jersey Shore. So I called down there to speak to her because somebody told me how to find her. And the bartender said she didn't work here anymore. But I'll tell you what, she comes in every Friday. I'll give her your, because he knew who I was right away because that was the only paper in the church. So he said, I'll give her your number. And I said, great. I'm sitting at home and the phone rings. And she said, I'm looking for Jerry Izenberg. I said, yeah, I'm Jerry Izenberg. She said, at last, the little boy with the baseball. My mother told me that story 1,000 times.
Yeah. That's great, Jerry. I mean, it's such, this is why I think folks have to be excited about this memoir, right? Because you touch on just so many of these personal stories who helped not only shape you, but this is years later, right? Where you're acting back.
Well, it goes back and forth about special things that my young years would be associated with, you know. But it ends when I go off the career. I'm 21 and I'm going out there, and I'm not going to spoil it. In case you want to read it, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But there's a very touching scene, last scene in the book between my father and me, and I'll let you read that. But I've been very lucky. I've had a good life. I had all kinds of things in the book, and I they put me in military school. I mean, I couldn't get along in school. I was terrible. And they didn't have the money for it. What happened was I had an aunt who had no children. And she made my sister and me her kids. And she destroyed me. She'd drive home from my mother's house and I'd be playing. We didn't live near any parks. I'd be playing football in the street and he's going to die. He's going to get killed. Send Lois, my sister, send her down there and get him out of the street. And she did this all my life. And she would, when she'd see me, she'd pinch my cheeks and, Anyway, Tante Annie, that means Annie, Yiddish. And she, there's a story, I don't want to tell it. You read it if you'll love it, what she did and how I finally loved her in the end. And she was really very, if she said to my father, Harry, I'll give you the money if you're going to send him away to school. I was 14 then. He wouldn't have taken it. He's a very proud man. The first supermarket in Newark, New Jersey opened a block away from my house. I used to go down there with a little wagon. I'll carry your groceries home for you, and I get a quarter a shift, right? My mother tells my father, you know that supermarket, I've been there for a year. I saved a ton of money. This could be his first year's tuition, you know. because he thought she had saved it, he took it. My mother always saved money. I don't know what the arrangement was, but she always had money. And there's one thing I will not tell you about because you got to read it. My mother's battle with the IRS when she was selling coats out of our house. My father was going nuts. Funny story. But military school, what saved me in military school was two things. One was I liked to write, and I was on the school newspaper. What really saved me was I was a very gifted musician. I played 5 instruments. I took composing and arranging before I got out of high school, before I got to high school. And I had 2 problems down here. One was the band director. He was a German. That wasn't the reason, but he had this Germanic attitude. John Philip Sousa wrote the music this way. You will play it this way, not the way you feel it, the way John Philip Sousa wrote it. He and I did not get along at all. But the head of the school, who owned half the school, he called himself Major. He got a title, he wore a uniform. He taught algebra, and he was the very worst teacher I ever had. He didn't teach anything. You had to have mathematical ability to pass. I mean, I could after 3 and 3 make 6. That was it for me. So, because he wouldn't teach, he'd say, "Oh, more important that you have general knowledge. I'm going to tell you how to fix your leg with a temporary splint. If you break it when you're all by yourself in the wilderness, I ain't going in the wilderness at all under any circumstances. And it's not going to do anything. It's going to break. But this is the kind of crap." But he had said, "If you have a problem, come see me." I walk in, I salute. Cadet Izenberg reporting, "Sir, you told me your door is always open." "Yeah, what do you want?" "Well, as you know, I'm failing algebra." I didn't say because of you, but that was the reason. "All I want is 1 more hour after lights out to try to get caught up." And he looked at me, he didn't say anything. Then he pointed a finger, he said, "Tell me something. Why is it the Jewish kids always want a bigger piece of the pie?" Oh, fuck him. I mean, I almost got thrown out of school that night, but I held that grudge against him and he held it against me. So that's why I did so well. I had 2 mortal enemies, the band director and him. And the band director, now it gets to be my senior year. I played everything you could play in the band except the trumpet. And he comes up to me, it's the first day back at school, my senior year. And he says, "Pack up that clarinet." I thought he was kicking me out of the band. He comes back with a baritone horn. It's about that big. And he puts it in my lap and he says, "You know everything. So you will learn to play this before the first dress parade in 12 days. And don't bother me about it. You know you're so smart. You must know." He walks away and he looks over his shoulder. He said, "The only thing I'll tell you is it's got the same fingering as a trumpet." And I yelled back, "I never played the freaking trumpet." Well, I'm not a good guy, but I'm not a dumb guy. I go to the trumpet players. I said, "Give me the fingering." I mastered it in about 3 days, which wasn't hard because it's not a melody instrument. It's an oompa oompa instrument. So we go through the first dress parade. I'm terrific and everything's fine. And he nods at me afterward. I figure I got to get this guy. I didn't get revenge by learning it. I filled a hole for him. Now I got to get my revenge. My roommate said, "Listen, you have done everything but blow up the chemistry lab. I can't imagine what you're going to do next." I said, "You watch the next dress parade. We're going to play the Star Spangled Banner, and that's where I'm going to get him in Star Spangled Banner. When you get to the part, and the rockets red glare, the bombs burst." In between, I did a jazz riff on the baritone horn.
Ooh.
I thought
He was not happy.
I thought he'd have a stroke. And we got back, and he looked at me and said, "Don't you ever, ever, ever." And just then, one of the kids said, "Hey, we should keep that because we'd be the only band who does it that way. What do you think of that?" He threw up his hands and walked away. No, I didn't. I was dumb. I was rotten, but not crazy. I didn't do it ever again after that, but I got my revenge. That
And it's obviously he was traditional. And Jerry, you're
oh
sharing so many
yeah,
amazing stories, from the beginning, when you were younger, sharing about your father's tough love, how you gained your love for baseball, how you were able to muster the anti-Semitism, but still come up and obviously help to shape who you are today. But as you
yeah.
know, we have many young journalists, joining us on this call. And I want to encourage all of the journalists to continue to please bring your questions, bring your thoughts into the chat. But I know this is something that you actually don't like to be called, right? You actually
Well, I'm
prefer,
not.
and I want
I'm
to make
not.
sure,
I'm not a journalist.
right? You're a
I'm an.
newspaper man,
I'm an.
right? Newspaper man is what you prefer.
I'm an ink-stained wretch who's worked for a newspaper for 72 years, and it wasn't. I was in New York for 4 years at the Old Herald Tribune, which is the best newspaper this country ever had, and I learned everything I learned about ethics in journalism from that. I learned when to write and when not to write. Wouldn't work today. Today, the whole method is you got to get there first. You got to be first and you got to be fast. Well, I have a quaint notion. I think you got to be right. And there's a big difference. I mean, I don't think our kids, too many of them know that now. And then most of them go into the newspaper business because they want to get on television. They think that's the shortcut. And I've seen some awful dummies who've used that shortcut.
Yeah, it's a much different, media industry now that our young journalists are entering, and going on that, you talk about kind of just the right way to do things. Get it right. Don't try to be first. What advice do you have for young journalists who are, we're in the college graduation season right now, Jerry? Lots of young journalists graduating from journalism schools across the country. What advice would you give them as they enter the media field, which is ever changing?
Well, my first advice would be to try to get a good factory job because the newspaper business is going to hell by suicide because they so frightened of the internet, they stopped doing it right. That's number one. I would advise you, learn from your opportunities. Ali was one of my best friends for like 50 years. But what I learned from him is what I taught myself. He always had a problem. He wouldn't go to the draft. Well, then I had to look up, I studied a case called Dickens versus United States, or United States versus Dickens. Was a guy, I forget the guy's name, the lawyer won 5 cases in one day for conscientious objector. I studied, I learned the law there. He got sick, and he was sick a long time. I learned a lot about Parkinson's. You're looking at a person. You're not looking at a cardboard cutout or something you idolize because and I didn't idolize him. He was my friend. If I idolized him, he couldn't have been my friend. I mean, if you're going to be my friend, I take you with the warts as well as the good side. And, I would say, be aware of what's happening around you. And once they get a little stature, they remind me of these guys on the television shows who sit at the piano and they say, and then I wrote, and they play a few bars, let me tell you something. I've been writing for newspapers for 72 years. I wrote for the best one in the United States, the Herald Tribune in New York. It went under later on. But between that and 2 years in Korea, so 68 years, I've been at the Star Ledger. And I learned a long time ago, no matter how good I think I wrote, how well I wrote for a newspaper, and how the prose was beautiful and this, that, it still lines a freaking garbage pail the next day. So don't underrate what you can do, but don't overrate who you are. The story today in journalism, the story is you, the writer or the speaker. And then I did this and I did. The story is the subject you're writing about, not you.
Oh, you. I think that's so important, like you said, because, we live in a world now where, as you said, so many are trying to be personalities, and not that that's wrong, but, kind of a mantra that I live by, is be humble, don't be humbled. And I think that's what you're talking to, just obviously do the work, things will come with the work, but always kind of be true and authentic to you, which I think is an important lesson.
And read. You have to.
Read.
Miss Lynn
Yes,
really taught me that.
always.
You know, my favorite American authors are people you probably never heard of. But there was a great guy in Chicago named Nelson Algren. And I recommend you look at his stuff. He writes about real people. And he wrote for, he didn't write for newspapers. He wrote for magazines. And he wrote, he wrote a lot of books. Not as many as I did, but he wrote a lot of books. But his were better. So, you know, you have to, yeah. No, who am I kidding? I didn't like Faulkner, although I did. The great thing about Faulkner, he wrote a book called, it was almost a novella called The Bear. It was a long short story. And when you read The Bear he's writing about the land. And the bear lived on that land. And everybody tried to take the land and this and that. The land belonged to the bear. It's not a parody, but it's a corollary to the old Indian, which I'm very much American Indian, I'm very much involved in that. It's a corollary to his idea, the land belongs to the Great Spirit. Your rent is to treat it properly. If I can write something where people think of it that way, then you're doing something. And it doesn't matter whether 100,000 people like it or one person likes it. That doesn't matter. You have to honestly like it. You have to say, this is the best I was capable of doing, but it's as good as anybody else. Don't settle for less. But learn your craft. Learn your damn craft. You know, you get to sit in the press box and eat a free hot dog. Oh, wonderful. Look at you. You're tiny. You're watching a professional game. That's not it. The one thing that I pride myself on, I always found a story. I had a fight with my editor one year, not my editor, the guy who was passing through. I never had editors in my mind. But he said to me, he was afraid of television. That's how long I've been around. I had put in a column I have mentioned tomorrow's game, what time it would be on. It was a World Series game. Because I wanted people to watch it. See, well, he never got it. He was only the editor of the paper, but he didn't understand it. If they watch the game, then I can find what they didn't see, and that'll be my column. Because I don't have to tell them, they know who won. I don't have to tell them that. And they probably know about the winning home run or whatever. It's fine. I'm looking for something else that day. I want to bring them something from that game they missed, they didn't see.
We just want to learn from you, right? So it's finding the story within the story, because as you're saying, Jerry, sports fans, they see everything that we see, right? They watch the games, and now analytics has obviously become so much a part of the game. But I think that is an important lesson, and something I kind of want to dive deeper with you on, especially for our writers here. You talked about your editor and working with your editor, and Jerry's been doing this for 72 years, so he gets it. But how do you forge a good relationship with your editor? How are you able to kind of pitch your ideas, to cover different things?
My editor has a disadvantage, and whoever he is, because music played such a role in my life. We used to fight. A guy would say, well, this is a better word. You can't use that word, I'm telling him. You can't use the word I wrote, not because I wrote it, but think of the meter of the sentence. In my autobiography, there's a chapter called The Sounds of Sports, and that comes from my musical background. I can tell you 9 times out of 10, if I can hear the ball hit the bat or the bat hit the ball, 9 times out of 10, I can tell you it's going out of the park or it's not. Look, I'll give you, there was a song called The Lullaby of Broadway. I'm going to give you a couple of lines from it and tell me, that is it music or is it writing or is it both? The rumble of the subway train. Imagine that. The rattle of the taxi. The debutantes were entertained at Angelo and Maxie's. Now, Angelo and Maxie, that was a high society restaurant in the village. But da-da, that's very important. If you break the meter, because here's another thing. All the school teachers didn't care for me because I used street language. I used up to a point. I used whatever I felt was going to tell the story the best. But the thing is, to break the rules, you have to know the rules. So you have to, in your first experiences, you have to follow those rules. A kid came to me one day, a nice kid, worked on our paper. He should have been in another business. He wasn't that good, but he got a job at a New York paper. He was all thrilled. I said, let me tell you something. I don't like that paper. I don't like its style. I won't name it, doesn't matter. But here's the thing. That's the way they want their paper. So you have to do it their way, but in your mind, you have to say, when I get someone else, I'm getting rid of this. That's not the way I should write. You'll know how you should write, writing is hard. Red Smith, who sat next to me at the Herald Tribune, I was a kid and he was the columnist. And somebody asked him, is it hard to write a column? And he said, no, all you do is open up a vein and bleed. That's the effort you have to put into writing a column. You have to, there are times where speed does become important. I was in Manila for Ali and Fraser, and it was without doubt the greatest heavyweight fight. Everybody thinks about the first one. That was political. Everybody took a side. They made Fraser a white guy against it was just, but the third one was the greatest heavyweight fight. I didn't see Cain and Abel. My camel broke down and I was a little late getting to the arena. But I know that Abel probably lost the fight because Cain had the mark of Cain on his forehead. All right, anyway, you realize I'm kidding you, but that's okay. Anyway, Ali Fraser was the most brutal. It's what I consider boxing can be. Two skilled fighters, not what's fighting now mostly, but boxing can be the most brutal, but the most delicate ballet. You have to think about that. See, I can go to a fight, but before the first round is over, two guys I never saw in my life, I'll know what each guy's trying to do. That's what you have to learn. If fighters are creatures of habit, guy comes back to the corner, you've heard a million times, and he says, listen, you've got to move to your left. You've got to move. You've got to get away from his right hand. Move to your left. Yeah, all right. Bell rings, he goes out, he moves to his left. He gets hit, he's moving to his right again. They're creatures of habit. And it's hard to overcome a lot of things. And you can become a creature of habit because something worked once doesn't mean it's going to work right. Every time you write, you have to think you're writing for the first time, but you're drawing on all the experiences you had.
Every time it's like you're writing for the first time. And I think that's because you're starting from a fresh slate, but you're drawing, as you said, from all the experiences you had that make you unique. And that's what makes you true to you. And Jerry, as we wrap, because we are tough on time, just really quickly, if you could just quickly touch on, what made you first want to become a sports, or a newspaper man, because you touched on your love of baseball and the boxing. How'd you fall into it?
Well, I started checking police blotters and chasing fire rangers. Sports was not my goal. They put me there. And every time I wanted to get out of the business, do something else, something happened. I got married. And then I had a kid. Then I got divorced. Then and something always kept me there. But really, I'm very happy. I've led a really good life. I mean, I've been very lucky. It's like somebody once said to me, well, I look at what you get paid and all that, and that's not, this is another guy who wanted to be a face on television. And I don't want to work with a chump change, and I don't want. I said, let me tell you something. I don't want to be a millionaire. I want to live like one. And every time I go on the road with an expense account, I do.
Real people who cover sports can attest to that. Jerry Izenberg, it's been such an honor and pleasure having you. 92 years young, right, Jerry? 92 years young.
I'll let you talk next time.
You shared such great things, and no, I obviously, and please, I'm sure you guys can follow up with Jerry, but we really do appreciate touching on that. That history is so important, that you shared, and it's important that our young people know that, because obviously, if you don't know your history, history will repeat itself, and I think our young journalists have to dig into that. So we appreciate you.
If you think you can tell them anything, nobody could tell me anything. So when you're young, you're young. It takes you got to get roughed up a little bit before you learn about life. I thank God every day that I was born during the Depression, because the most important classroom. I went to an urban college, no cement, no grass. I worked 40 hours a week at night to get through school, but the most important classroom I ever sat in was in the 1930s, watching my mom and my dad fight their way to survive and help us eat and whatever during the Depression. And you learn, if you get knocked down, you gotta get up. Don't wait for someone to pick you up, because nobody gives a shit.
Right? Like you said, I mean, you learn through the adversity. And I think that's what's so important for our young journalists. You will have bumps along the road, but you truly can make it. And again, Jerry Izenberg, right here, he told you about how he was in school, but look at him now. He's been over 70 years in the journalism industry. So again, Jerry, thank you so much for your time. Can you let people know where they can get your book, where we can get this new memoir?
Well, go to Amazon, but I'm going to give you the fastest way to get it. If you go to Amazon and you go to books, I'll tell you the title, but don't put the title in. Just type in my name, because there'll be about 13, 14 book covers that'll come up. The first one will be the one you want. It's a picture of my father and me walking down the main street in Newark, the Four Corners. I've got on knickers. I'm 8 years old. I got a ski cap on. I'm adorable. And my father's got a overcoat and a fedora, and every time we pass a woman, he tips the hat to the woman when he walks. He was old school. And I'll tell you one thing that I learned. Here's how I learned from him, what I tried to do all my life. He was dying, and we knew it, and he knew it, but he wasn't in bed. I go over to see him, he says, open up my closet door. What do you see? I had a sport jacket, a couple pairs of pants, socks, and not much. And he comes over, and he had a habit when he wanted me to remember. He started when I was like 5. He'd put a hand on each shoulder and bring his head down and stare at me. He said, okay, now you know. I have nothing to leave you except my good name. Don't screw it up. But he didn't say screw.
Some other colorful words that you guys can read between the lines.
And I tried, that's how I tried to live. And to me, he's still with me.
Of that name, and again, honoring a tribute to your father's memory. Jerry, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We know there's anywhere that you could be, but we truly appreciate it. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us here live tonight.
Give him the name. Give him the name of the book.
I'm going to give you guys the name of the book one more time. Again, a special thanks to Jerry Izenberg for joining us. And as he said, you can go to Amazon, but it's very important that you all put this name in. All right. So his new memoir is Baseball, Nazis, and Nedick's hot dogs growing up Jewish in the 1930s in Newark. Make sure you guys put that in, check it out, especially since this is the New England chapter. I'm sure you guys will probably resonate with some of the special memories that Jerry touches on within the region and area. Jerry, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much, everyone. We hope you all have a fantastic night. And again, thank you so much to SPJ New England for hosting us tonight.
Thank you.